Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cecily Seeley. I'm the program coordinator for the bookstore at Busboys and Poets. Today we have a fantastic event ahead of us for God of Mercy. Without further take away, you guys enjoy your time on stage.
Not yet. Nope. A little bit more. Get that soft voices.
Okay. Now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I know my parents have hearts, but they haven't made their way. I don't know where they are.
Do you want me to go find them?
Oh, thank you. Where?
I've started the live stream, so you guys can just kind of chat in the meantime.
How are you doing, Nancy?
Good, how are you? It's always special to have a little time here.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't do it.
Yes.
So let's present your hometown.
Yes, this is actually really special. I did a lot of the writing for this novel, or some of the writing for this novel at Busboys, but not at this location. I did it at the one in Tacoma Park, or Tacoma, DC. So this was like this was like fun time, you know. This was really good. Yeah.
I wanted to visual as a reader.
Right.
In the next,
Good, yeah.
Don't be shy.
okay. So, God of Mercy is a novel that I have so much respect for. It's a study novel, and it meant a lot. We were our first 2 minutes together in Iowa, so
Okay.
it feels very special. And I think it's almost a decade later. So
Yeah.
it feels really special to share this experience with you of presenting your first novel in your hometown.
Thank you.
Can I have you read for us?
Yes, you can. Are you sure? It's okay. I didn't bring my own copy. I'm sorry. I thought I saw my auntie Uche and my mom walk in, and it inspired me to read from a different part of the novel that I was going to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from chapter 1, but then if I can just find it, I'm going to read from another section of the novel because there's an evil song there, and I thought we could do some singing. Does that sound okay? If I can find it. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's funny, as a writer, you just know the novel, so you know where to find things. In this 300-page work, it's really bizarre. It's not normal, I don't think. But here we go. This is from chapter 1. There is the final truth, and Ijoma knew it resided within her, tinier than a speck, when the blowing winds became like wings, and her feet shook the branches of the leaning orange tree, knocking Juba's vest to the ground. It drew her upward, raising her like smoke from a burning fire, raising her to the nests of insect birds and the first gatherings of light from Anyanwu, the divine sun. She rested there, suspended like fruit too precious to pluck, or a thought too erratic to name. She rose to the sky, and nobody was there to see it. The reasoning lay in her wind-blown wings. The pleasure lay there too, and they joined with her spirit to beat steadily, steadily, deep like the do, deepening that which was lifted, that which her thoughts and body followed. Her fingers stretched before curling inward towards her palms. Her chest now rose upward, then fell to greet her heart, while the prickly dots, like a million rose thorns, flashed across her left cheek, then her lips, then her right ear lobe, before passing into the air, returning to its abode as she let out a sigh and magnified the wonder. Tears were trembling in her eyes, and through them Ijana saw a single vision, printed past deep way the divine sky, with her lips moving, counting and recounting the faces of ancestors and the faces of those unknown, celebrating their names, with promises guided by Metro, a promise of many prayers for those little ones, those whom she had not yet seen, those looking through her with truth and kindness, as she prayed and promised and felt more still than death itself, and in that stillness found the greatest of life, and in that life appears the most supreme for making anything or one possible. She closed her eyes, the sky closed too, full clouds colliding within a moment, and Ijoma found her feet touching the earth, and clutched her hands, not warm from the moving light. And she did not understand it all, not the faint vibrations in her bones, or the smell of skybound dust, or the rupture of what was thought to be known and understood, as she heard of Woodley's footsteps, and ran through the compound to hide and find understanding in the broken home. That was from chapter 1. So my vision isn't sort of in my context, I'm kind of acting that a little bit. Let's see. So this next excerpt comes from the part of the novel where Ijoma is sent away, and Ijoma is the protagonist of the novel, and she's sent away by her father because her father feels deep shame about Ijoma. She's mute, she's disabled, she can also fly, and her father feels deep shame about her because these conditions that she has caused much nutrition to change in her village. So her father's ashamed and sends her away, and everyone's not allowed to do that. And the Divya, the medicine man of the village, Igokwe, is lamenting that. And so this is a scene from that episode. And Igokwe too prayed for Ijoma to come home, praying for the return of Ichu's daughter, their only vessels of the most supreme. He sensed the emergence of the thought to send some virulent men to Amalike to return her to the village. But he immediately recoiled, remembering the murders of the eastern town and their wicked divination. The lives of Ichu's people would not be risked a second time. But Chuko would destroy this village if Ijoma is not within it. And the thought came again, over and again, sending men, fields and fields of Varyrian men, who would be strong and protected. But the divination is failing since the holy stones had not protected Ichulu, and the cowrie shells were not being answered. What if they can sacrifice to the supreme being? A sacrifice of 1,000 chickens, 100 goats, and rams, and 50 cows. And if Chuko is not satisfied, a child would appease the hunger of the most supreme. Igokwe does not make sacrifices to Chuko, the most supreme, is most supreme. For which Igokwe has seen the gods at war, and the girl who flies, and the child delivered from the evil forest. No Igokwe has communed with Chuko through the flesh. And as the Divya sat in his red Cleobe, lifting his goat horn cup to the divine, which sacrificial name the cowrie shells would reveal, he heard commotion building near the path to the market square. Ngozi imama mungu, Ngozi imama mungu, onye chinyereze nachiba mama mungu, onye chinyereze nachiba mama mungu. The song translates to, Ngozi, you are so beautiful, Mbongo. Ngozi, you are so beautiful, Mbongo. Whoever she has appointed, let them rule. You are so beautiful, Mbongo. Whoever she has appointed, let them rule. You are so beautiful, Mbongo. And then he heard the sounds that astonished him, the cries of many little babies at once. And he hurried to the path to the market square and bore witness to the reason the people had been singing their song. Seeing Ngozi and seeing that she had given birth to 4 children, 2 carried in the folds of her cradle arms, 2 carried in the arms of the one called her husband, as all were dancing and dancing to the melody of the singing, as the people began shouting the names of the infant children. Chukwuka, the first child, Chukwuzatan, the second child, Chukwudinma, the third child, and the 4th, the only female child, they named Ijoma. And Iboke believed that Chukwu was alive and was not angry with the village, as he felt his ease return within his reason, as he began weeping amongst each other's jubilation, accepting the good word that the sacrifice would never occur again. Thank you.
It was really gratifying to hear these wonderful excerpts from
Thank you. Thank you.
So my first question about this wonderful novel is, I want to hear some more about the life of this book. When did you start to write it, and why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think when I started writing this book is an interesting question. I think I officially started about 8 years ago as an undergrad at Brown. I was in a friend's dorm room. I was in his, on his bed, my friend's bed. And the first sentence just kind of came to me. Nobody in the village cared for the erosion. And it just kind of came, and I wrote it down, and it felt like a novel. The weight of it, the gesture of it felt like a novel. And so it just kept kind of coming. So that was the first time I put pen to paper to write it. But I think the novel itself, when I was 9 years old, I read Things Fall Apart. And in Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe does a great job of portraying the evil landscape before colonization began. The problem that I experienced as a 9-year-old reader was that in these evil communities, twins were sent to the evil forests. And I was a twin, I was a twin sister. So I thought, as a 9-year-old, thank God for these white missionaries that came to evil lands and changed the culture and saved me, a twin, from being sent to the evil forest. That was my rationale. And so, as I encountered Things Fall Apart as an undergrad, as I got older, I realized that Chinua Achebe was not saying that we should praise white missionaries for instituting colonial discourse in evil lands, you know what I mean? But for me, it felt like I couldn't escape the fact that my life was so tied to this like white savior complex. And so I needed to write a novel that talked about Black communities, evil communities, changing on their own terms, changing from within. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's like I needed, because I didn't want my life to be conditioned on what white people were doing. I wanted the possibility to emerge that Black people, by their own revelation and their own power and their own miracles, could save us. We can save ourselves. Does that make sense?
That's powerful, and I think that's why my read of this novel and other people's experiences that I've seen on social media, people always describe your novel as being a decolonial novel.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you experience that assessment and whether you agree. And I'm also curious if you have any thoughts about what it means for a novel to be decolonial.
So I think the novel is decolonial. It's anti-colonial. It's against. It situates itself as being against hegemony, which is the institution of a cultural practice as the right way or the truth of a society, and sets to explore what it means through this Igbo proverb of where one thing stands, another thing stands beside it. Meaning there is duality in everything. So there is no singular absolute mode of existing, but there's a multiplicity. Right? And so I think this novel exists in that framework. So I think it is a decolonial novel in that respect. And I think, to answer the second part of the question, I think a decolonial novel or an anti-colonial novel is a novel that sees hegemony for what it is, particularly white hegemony, and ignores it. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't attack it. It doesn't doesn't bastardize it. It just says, I see you, whiteness, for what you are, which is like a footnote. You know, like it's not whiteness, white hegemony, not whiteness, but white hegemony is not this singular force that it wants people to perceive it as. It's one discourse out of millions. And I think writers who understand decolonial or anti-colonial discourse understand that whiteness is just that, a discourse, not the centerpiece. It's not the center.
That's really beautifully stated. Let me write my questions. So you mentioned things called parents. And I'm curious to know about other authors or other books that led your process as you wrote this book.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, Alexia, Alexia and I went to grad school together, and we would always talk about these Black authors that inspire us, motivate us. When I set out to write God of Mercy, I remember being like, this feels like a loss. This process of writing fiction and writing a whole novel. And so to cope with that, I said, I'm going to build a family tree. And so in my family tree, I was the child, and O.K. Ndide, the author of Foreign Gods Inc., was the dad, and Yvonne Vera, the Zimbabwean author of Butterfly Burning, was the mom. Toni Morrison was the grandma, and Chinua Achebe was grandpa, right? And I say that to say that their presence, at least in my imagination, was enough to get me through the writing of the novel. But their works really inspired the novel in deep ways. O.K. Ndide's Foreign God Inc., his writing style reminds me of what all good writing should do, which is tell a story. Like if there is no story, there is no reason to write it. And so he is really good. His work is incredible, and he's just really good about just laying the story all out there. Yvonne Vera of Zimbabwe wrote Butterfly Burning, and I read that as an undergraduate, and I instantly fell in love because of the use of poetry and form. It was just so eloquent and so sophisticated, and so it felt like a dream, reading her. And then, so I've included a lot of poetry in my work as well. Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon was instrumental to this text. And the myth, the quote-unquote myth, of the flying the power that Joba has to fly comes from the quote-unquote myth of the flying eagle. I don't know if you guys have heard the story, but during the era of slavery, there were Igbo slaves that were taken off of the coast of Georgia, and they were there as enslaved people, but they overtook the ship, and they were trying to figure out what to do next. Like, do you go to the Americas? Do you keep going forward? Do we go back to Africa? And if so, how do we do that? We don't have a map, we don't have a compass, we don't have navigation tools. So they decided to like go towards the land, and of course their ship was seized by the Georgians who lived there at the time. And the legend goes that once after the ship was seized, those evil people flew back to Africa and were free. And so Toni Morrison explores that myth in Song of Solomon with Shalimar. I return to that myth again and reclaim it for evil people. In Jonah's flight, I mean, any Jonah having an ancestor that was known to have flown. So Song of Solomon is very instrumental in the text. And of course, we tell the part about Shimon and Children. Yeah.
Fantastic. I would love to hear some more about how you're thinking about this metaphor of flight
Yeah.
in the novel. I thought it was powerful.
Thank you. So when I was growing up, I'm Catholic, and when I was growing up, we were told that like every date on the calendar is attributed to a saint. And so my birth date is attributed to Saint Joseph of Cupertino, who was the saint known to have flown. He was known as the flying saint because he would levitate while praying. And I just thought, as an African Studies undergraduate at Brown, why am I taking as literal the Catholic arguments that there was a saint who could fly, but taking as myth the Black arguments that Black slaves who went to Africa? But why am I not giving weight to both narratives? Does that make sense? And so it was important for me to then reclaim both sides of those narratives and fictionalize it and say, okay, like you have these two narratives in history. How can we concretize it in such a way that emboldens not just believers in God or believers in Christianity, but also just Black people. And so in the book talks about St. Joseph of Cupertino, but then also gives more attention to the ancestors of Ijoma and to Ijoma herself. I think flight as a metaphor is really about transcendence and coming to a deeper meaning, a deeper truth, a deeper understanding of reality. Yeah.
That's beautiful. A part of what I love so much about this book was it feels really spiritual, and it feels there's something almost reverent about this book, about how it handles its character, and it feels very it's a very loving, caring, at times quite ethical book. So I'm curious, did you need to write a book that's so spiritual?
I did. It's funny, in Iowa, our Jonathan, one of our workshop colleagues, said that it was holy text. We called it holy text when it was just a manuscript. I'm deeply spiritual, and I think it was, who said that their writing was a prayer? Was that? Some famous writer, maybe it was Chekhov who said that their writing was a prayer. I think my writing is a prayer. I think it is a prayer to my ancestors. I think it's a prayer to my God. I think it's me extending my spiritual life towards the reader to say, this is what I'm reflecting on this cosmic divine level. Let's share that experience.
It's so poetic.
Thank you.
I love that.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
So I'm going to ask a question about gender. In the book, was clear to me that in this village, that the men, the fathers, the husbands have structural power, that they're in charge. But in a quiet way, the female characters, I found, especially Ijoma, our protagonist who can fly, when we look older, she's a small child. But I was also thinking about Ijoma's mother and the other female characters who are quite powerfully, I should say, they're all quietly powerful compared to the husbands who are structurally powerful. So I'm curious to know what you were thinking about maybe Igbo gender expectations as you wrote this book.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that one. So Igbo society is patriarchal, but not in the Western way of patriarchy. It has its own sensibility. I think the best way to describe it is that there are roles in the society, roles that are perceived as equally important. Men are given some of those roles, and women are given others. So, for example, like in the book, like there are these village meetings, but only the men attend those. But then there's also like the birthing of a newborn, and only the women can attend those. Attend that kind of gathering. I don't like the people's sensibility around gender. I think it's still patriarchy. I think it's still problematic. I think there are ways that it places men above women instead of seeing them as equal. And so in the novel, I try to subvert that as much as possible by giving a lot of power and agency to Ijoma and her friend Chinwe, as well as to her mom. Just showcase the fact, like, the fact that there are all these rules about what men and women can do and how they can be, but the novel breaks those rules and says, in actuality, when we perceive gender as not this defining feature of our capabilities in society, anything is possible. I think one of my favorite features of the Igbo language is that the third person is the same across gender. So it's interesting, like in the West, everyone is like debating pronouns right now, or like how pronouns can be used, or how pronouns are to be used. But in Igbo, everyone shares the pronouns are genderless, so everyone has the same pronoun. And I think that sensibility around gender in Igbo cosmology and Igbo ontology, I think, is the right sensibility, right? That like we're all existing in the world as we are, and gender is but one marker of difference, but not this, like, I don't want to say existential, but not this predetermined way of existing. It's open to possibility to change. Yeah.
I love hearing you talk. There's just something poetic about how, there's something poetic about how you express yourself, and that is manifested in your prose. So thank you for all of your wonderful answers. I want to open up to questions, if any of you have.
Don't be shy, Will.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I have to ask a question, sorry. So So I guess one question I have is when you were done with your very first draft, what was your experience saying that I finished the very first draft? And the second question following that is now that you're kind of going at it about you know expressing yourself in the most wonderful ways with your book, what are you thinking now about even like when realistic projects start going through your head, or what are you thinking right now about that? So, two questions.
We say about next projects?
Yeah, your next project. Whether you've been thinking about it in the first place. So.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. So, wow. I'm trying to think back to like, I think it was maybe 2017 that I finished the first drafts. I'm trying to think back to how, I mean, I felt ecstatic. Like it was to see something go from a blank Word document to then having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages in front of you is ecstatic. It's exciting. It feels like a burden has been lifted in many ways. Because I think the way that people have described it to me is that stories come finding you, and it's then your responsibility to tell them. So I think when the first draft was done, it felt like that responsibility, I had fulfilled my responsibility to the story. But the thing is, first drafts are just first drafts, right? Like, I think the novel went through 8, maybe 9 different revisions with different agents and different editors and different people before it came to the final version that we have before us. So the first draft was an accomplishment, but it was like the beginning of a lot more work that had to get done. And all of it felt like meaningful work and exciting work. It didn't feel, I mean, there were times when I felt frustrated, for sure. I felt like it would never become a book. It felt like no one understood what I was doing on the page. But over time, it found people that supported it, and that was very powerful. As far as upcoming projects, I'm working on this novel number 2 right now. And I was told by Ben Oakley not to say much about it, but to be superstitious. And say, I think what I will say is that this is a novel that takes place in the US. It takes place at Brown, my alma mater, and it deals with hope and racism and how we come to understand both of these things simultaneously. Thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to find out, how did you come about the title of this book? And how do you think, I know several thoughts went through your head, and to have a title is very difficult. So can you please let us know how you came about this great title?
Thank you so much. That's my auntie Linda, you guys. So, thank you Linda for your question. It's funny, that's actually a really interesting question. Good question. The title at the beginning was called Ichulu, so it was just the name of the village that the story takes place at. So that's what I called it, but it didn't make sense to call it that because the story takes place in 2 different villages, and I wanted to showcase the duality of that. So then I was working with agents who were like, we were working on it for 3 years, and I was getting frustrated, so I renamed the manuscript and let us be, ... Literally, it was like, and let us be with an ellipsis. And they were like, what are you doing? This is a mess, like, this is not a good title, this is a joke. So when I sent it to my current agents, it was still called And Let Us Be with the ellipsis, and he said, oh, please, you have to change this. This is such a grand novel, it's so big. The title needs to be just as big as the story. And And so I went to the barber shop to cut my hair, and I was waiting, it was COVID, so I had to wait outside. And I was just like standing in front of the barber shop, and I was thinking about the title, what I should rename it as. And I just thought that one of the most pronounced themes in the text is mercy. It just is. Like that is, it's merciful love, but like mercy is such a big part of the theme of the novel. And I thought that so much of the novel centers around Ijeoma's faith in God and how that brings her through like all the craziness of her life. So I thought God of Mercy made sense together. And it felt big. It felt like a big enough title to carry the weightiness of the story. So that's how I stuck with it. I was literally in front of the barber shop, and it just kind of came out of Mercy, and I thought, okay, I can do this. And that's how it happens.
Way to get it, book title.
And yeah.
So I know there's like a lot of people talk about, they've been through a lot in their life, and maybe one day I'm gonna create a book, but that book never comes, or it never, materializes or anything like that. So what made you put your 2 feet down on the ground and say, I'm gonna make this book? What was the first thing that's like, I'm gonna make this book materialize, I'm gonna bring it to life, I'm gonna actually write this book? Because in 2017, you said you finished your first draft. What year did you first think about, I'm gonna go through with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's like scary. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, in undergraduate, I was pre-med, believe it or not. So I was like ready to be a doctor. I studied organic chemistry, both semesters. I took physics, and I took the MCAT. I was like ready to go, But then my senior year, I just felt I had to make the choice between going to medical school or going to the MFA program at Iowa for creative writing. And I was talking to my friends, and they were just like, look, easy, if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. Like, they'll never, the thing about med school is that once you start, it just doesn't stop. So I just thought, I'll just go to grad school before going to med school, and I just, because by then the story was like in my mind, and I needed time to write it. And grad school is a great place to have enough time to write the story. And that was in 2012. So 2013 rolled around, I applied to grad school. I got in, did not think that I would, but I got in to Iowa, which is a feat in and of itself. I just kept writing. I kept working on it. And I think I knew it was going to be a novel when I got to Iowa. And I saw, Iowa is like the #1 program in the country, it's supposed to be really good. And I saw the work of my peers, and I thought, I'm holding it down. I'm doing a good job. I'm not terrible. Like, everyone's doing their, you know what I mean? Like, it felt comfortable, So I was like, okay, I can do this. I can get this done. And so I left Iowa early and came back home to DC, and I kept writing. I got a full-time job as a scheduling associate at a hospital at Georgetown Star, which was a soul-sucking job. I never do that. I never worked that job ever. Because you have to turn people away who don't have insurance, and it's the worst feeling ever. But I was working that job trying to write. I was super depressed. I quit that job, and the same day I just went back to writing. We did the first draft that year, and that was around 2016, 2017. And I emailed my writing professor from Iowa, and she was like, send it to my agent right now. And I sent it to her agent, and that was my agent at the time, and he loved it. They said that there was a lot of work that had to be done, but he believed that it was going to get published. And so, because he believed, I believed too. And so I was working with him, and then 3 years later, he was like, I don't want to work with you anymore. You have to like find a new agent. And that was really disheartening. And then I went through this period of doubts. I doubted whether I was supposed to be a writer. I doubted whether this book would ever get published. I doubted whether my life had any purpose or any meaning, because this relationship that was going so well was kind of stopped. Also, people, I don't know if you guys know this about writing or the publishing industry, but like finding an agent is one of the hardest things you can do. It's very difficult. They get hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions a week, a day, and they have to go through all these submissions to find people that they want to represent. So finding an agent is not easy. So by these people saying, no, I want to work with you, I thought it was the end of my career. But then, like, you know, I told a friend about this, and she was like, come to my agents, they'll teach you right. So I went to my friend's agent, that was Raphael Fromkin, the author of Confidence. And the rest is kind of history. Like, her agent and I worked well together. He read the latest drafts and really believed in the text. And it sold straight up, just sold really quickly. And I met my editor, Danny Vasquez, who's up at Ashley House in New York. He loved it instantly, and it just kind of worked out from there. And that's when I knew it wouldn't be a novel, and that's when I knew that everything was like coming to fruition. It's a really powerful feeling to have that, because the turnaround between when it's a Word document on your laptop and when it's in contract is very quick. Like when it happens very quickly, and all of a sudden you can no longer share the Word document with friends because it's under contract, you know. But that's what happened.
I have a question over here. How have you found the experience of being a published author and having people read your work and tell you your work is good? And what has that been like for you?
That's a good question. So it's exhilarating and nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing. The first time I felt like a published author was when I went to Goodreads. Goodreads is this website, the social media website, where people leave comments about books they've read and they rate them. And I would go on and like people would say these like mean things or like these terrible things. People said great things, but you never remember the great things, right? You always remember the criticisms. And so I felt disheartened by that a little bit. But then the book has found its niche in many ways. It's found its readership. So last week I was just at the University of Chicago's Africana Studies Department, or committee, they're not in the department yet. And an entire class of students learning about Africa had read the book. And I just thought that's exactly what I wanted for it, to find an academic home, to find that kind of leadership. So that was really exciting. I think getting to travel, getting to do speaking engagements, getting to meet famous writers like Ben Oakley, of all people, that's been really exciting. It's been really a dream come true in many ways. The book has opened up so many opportunities that I didn't think a book could open up. You know, I thought that like you write a book and you make money from writing a book, and you kind of hope the best for it. But like I've met people that I idolize, and I've met wonderful students at universities, and I've met people like this audience who are coming together for the purpose of like talking about that immersion, talking about the ideas and the text, and that's really powerful.
what I would ask is, what is your advice for people who have an idea or, something they're good at, and for them to like bring it to life instead of just, keep it going? Because a lot of people, I'm gonna do it tomorrow, I'm gonna do it in 2 weeks. What is your advice to them to like actually go for their dream or like, make it manifest in real life instead of just talk about it so much?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing I would say is to believe. Like, no dream, no goal can ever come to fruition without belief. And I think and that belief can take any form or shape, but like if it's believing in the goal and believing that it will come to pass, that's a form. If it's believing in a higher power, that your higher power will facilitate things, move the entire universe to make the dream happen, that's a form of belief. Believing in God, believing in ancestors and saints and all of heaven, I think believing, that's what I would say. Because even now, like, there's still so much ahead. Like, for me and writing, and there's so much uncharted territory, there's so many unanswered questions, but I try to believe the best for my career and the best for my writing, and just believing that like ways will open up for there to be opportunities to write, opportunities to keep doing this. I think that self-doubt and self-criticism are super toxic and are antithetical to allowing things to be manifest. I don't know, there's this thing of like, sometimes, and I've been doing, I did this for a project when I was looking at it, I found myself writing one line or deleting it, or writing in my notebook and erasing it, or just not believing what I was doing. And I think that mindset has to be done away with if anybody's going to achieve their goals. I think it has to be a groundedness in a sense that like your goal is meant to happen. There has to be a deeper purpose behind it, a deeper groundedness. It's mystical, right? Isn't it? Like, we don't know what tomorrow holds for any of us, but we believe in the best of things, and we hope for the best of things, and in so doing, I think those things are made manifest.
I feel very comforted by that response.
Good evening, everyone. So my question, your book, you have a lot of interesting characters with unique personalities. Were these characters influenced by any real characters in your life?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Thank you, Marie. That's my cousin, Marie. Yes, the answer is yes. So, when I was living in Nigeria, I went to middle school in Nigeria, and it's common for people in Nigeria. So let me backtrack a little bit. Nigeria is a struggling country in many ways. It's struggling politically, it struggles socioeconomically, and one of those struggles is that families who are living in the poor regions of the country, when they have kids, most of the time they can't afford to fend or raise their children. And so what they'll do is they'll send their kids off into the city. And when I say kids, I mean like young children, like 6, 7. They'll send them off into the city, and those children will become house help. So they'll become the servants of these city dwellers. So when I was living in Nigeria, when I was in middle school, my guardian hired, I guess, it's a terrible practice, but where she hired from this family in a poor region a girl of like 6 years old, first grade, who would then cook and clean and do chores and do all these things in exchange for her education. And her name was Ijoma, and she was very silent. Like, I thought she couldn't speak. She was very quiet and shy. Until we went to like, in the 90s, we would like take a boombox and record on the cassettes. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so we would record from the radio. And we went out one evening, and when I came back, my recording of the song was disrupted because the drama, the house person, was singing on the tape. And I just thought, wow, she does have a voice. She can sing, And that was brought into the text. I think a lot of Ijama's parents, Ijama the protagonist, I think her parents are in many ways my parents to some degree. I think that like I borrowed a lot of the characteristics of my mom and dad and my aunties and uncles and kind of put them in the text, which is why the acknowledgements, I acknowledge like so many of my relatives because I think I needed to imagine them because I had already imagined them as people, or I had seen them as people. It was easier to imagine these characters. The pastor is like many evil pastors. Like he's like a typical Nigerian pastor that has lost his way. The friends are like friends that I've had. The insecurities that Ijoma has about her friendships are insecurities that I've had about my friendships, about whether I can trust people, about whether I can like believe in people in ways that friendship requires. They're all people that I feel like I've met. And also the crazy thing too is that like sometimes characters come fully formed. Have you experienced this stuff yet? Like sometimes characters come ready-made. Like they're like, this is who I am, and you're gonna write me exactly as I am. So a lot of characters came that were like Ibokwe, the Dibia, like he came like fully formed. I was like, I see you, and I'm gonna honor you, this character, by telling the truth of your fictional story. So that was the experience of that.
Hi. So I have a question now that you've gone through this whole process and you have your first book. I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you wish that you'd known that you've learned through this process that you're carrying with you into your next project?
I wish that I had spoken up a little bit more. So when I didn't tell you guys as part of the story, I actually worked with 3 different agents for God of Mercy. One was the agents at 3 Arts Entertainment, who's a really fine agency and they were like, please, we can't work with you anymore, we have to partners. The second was an agent at Janko and Nesbitt's, which is a very good published agency. And they wanted me to like do the craziest things with the novel. They were like, we want you to like give us this tremendous, spectacular ending with all these features and all these things going on. And I was like, okay, I think I can do that. So I reworked the entire manuscript into something that I detested. I did not like it at all. But I didn't fight for the vision I had. I just kind of went along with what these agents were saying. Because I trusted them. I was like, these people sell books for a living. They know what's good. So I'm going to just keep saying yes to them. And so I did that first revision. I submitted it. They said they liked it, but they wanted more and wanted bigger and better and like more. And I was just like, I can't do bigger and better, but I can try. So I redid it again, and like I hated it even more. It was really awful. And then I left. I said, I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore because I don't think we have the same vision for this project. And I just don't believe in it anymore based on what you're telling me to do. I wish I had done that sooner, right? I wish I had spoken up for the vision earlier because when I went to my third agent, I gave him the version of the story before I met with Jenny Monazbet, so the two versions before, and he instantly fell in love with it, instantly believed in it, and instantly, and he said you can go out with it with publishers like the next day. Just believe in it so quickly. So I wish I had just spoken up sooner. It would have meant less labor and less discontentment, I guess. The other thing too is I didn't know a lot about publishing and deadlines and like the fact that blurbs have to be in at a certain time and like all these different things have to be put in place. So I think I would have been more earnest about deadlines and what I didn't like about the book or what I didn't like about how things are being handled. I wish I had spoken up more. I think I was just very quiet and shy and like, not wanting to ruffle any feathers and didn't want to come off as like a diva or that kind of thing. But I think it's important for every writer to be able to defend themselves because it's such a cutthroat industry. And really the person who has your back the most is you. And it's just important to like be ready to like defend your work, defend your art, defend your time, defend your pay, defend all the things that like are being thrown at you at once. So that's what I would do differently. I think with this next project, I'm going to do just that, like defend my sensibility, defend what I want to accomplish as a writer. And that's really important.
As a District of Columbia educator, how has the reception been from the academic community? How have they received your book? And also, has there been any buzz about your book becoming part of a high school curriculum?
That's a good question. So I work as a DCPS educator, Maureen knows that. And my students, their parents bought the book and would give it to my students. And I'd see copies of God of Mercy in class, like, how'd you get that? You're 9. That was really cool to see, like a lot of parents support the project. Like everyone seems to be reading it. So that was really exciting, and I'm really grateful for my community for supporting me in that way. As far as the curriculum question, I don't know that it'll be put into a high school curriculum. That would be crazy if it did. That would be amazing. But right now, it's being considered for a lot of college level curricula. So in the University of Chicago, where I was last week, they put it in their curriculum. I think universities aren't considering. It's still really new, so people are kind of testing the waters. But people are looking at it, and that's really exciting. I think there is buzz. I think New Chicago is a big enough school and a school that's reputable enough that if they like it, other schools might buy in. So that's really exciting to see. Yeah.
We have time for one more question, if anybody has one.
And also, how has the book been received by your own community, by the Igbo community? How were, the aunties and uncles, what feedback are they giving you? Did you get the names right? Did you get the meaning of the names right?
That's so funny. I have not, believe it or not, Maureen, I have not gotten any feedback from people. Isn't that crazy? Not even in reviews, not even on Goodreads. So I have no idea if I did it justice. From people, you know what I mean? Like, I have no idea from, like, it's so funny, my dad is in the audience. This man said he read the novel, and he skimmed, he like literally did, he skimmed it, and said, I read it, it was good. I was like, maybe 2 minutes. And my mom has it on her nightstand, and she's like, I'll get to it, I'll do it. But like, no one has really gotten feedback. So I have heard that I did justice, but I haven't heard it from people who matter. My family, right? From people who really know those villages, and would really know if I did it justice.
Well, I hope that your parents were challenged. My dad doesn't read my fiction, but I don't read about it.
I also, yes, that's everything. Sometimes I think I get embarrassed, because I'm like, I don't want you to read.
But
Yeah.
my family's also very conservative.
Yeah.
And I still raise my
I'm not conservative.
God.
Yeah.
But not in a kind of traditional Christian
I know you
sense.
do.
I want to read it.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. I think this one they can read. The next one, no. The next one, don't read that. Read this one because it's family friendly. The next one is not. It's not. Yeah.
Oh, God. I have to ask.
One more question, one on video.
Okay, I never ask questions. It turns out that, I came here thinking that this was sounded like a really interesting discussion, and the book sounds really interesting. Well, it turns out my daughter knows you. Shout out to Brown.
Your daughter.
Michaela Seago.
Oh my God, we're in the same class. We're in the same year.
Exactly. She said, "Oh, we were classmates originally. Tell them I said hi."
Oh my God, Michaela.
But I told her that the next novel is about brown and racism, and she goes, "Whoa!" So I really want to hear more about that. And this whole thing was coincidental because I didn't know she would do.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting. But I can tell you that the very first time that she ever experienced racism was at Brown,
Yeah.
which was supposed to be, this liberal
Exactly.
school and everything, and she never experienced it until she went there. So I thought that was interesting to get kind of like your feedback.
Yeah, I'll speak to it. I mean, I've been told not to, but for you, I will. Because this is a very serendipitous moment.
For the crowd, my daughter is Asian, so that's
Yes.
good to
Yeah, I remember Michaela. We were the closest of friends, but we were friends on Facebook.
She does say, "Oh, he's such a nice guy."
Yeah.
Well, he is the nicest guy.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, she was an amazing person.
And she is a doctor now.
Oh, that's awesome. You're told all the time. I have a cousin in the audience, Ramsey, and Ramsey's like he's school age. She's like in middle school, and we tell our kids. At least I was told, do well in school, get good grades, go to college, get a great job, buy a house. In other words, hope for these very material things. Hope for that. Hope to be a doctor. Hope to buy a house. Hope to do these kinds of things. And we kind of encourage and we kind of tuck those goals into our institutions of higher learning. So we say, like, learning is not for learning is for making money. That's the ultimate goal of an education, is to earn. But that's not accurate, right? Like, colleges are not there to get you a job. Colleges are there to give you a degree. Nothing in life is actually promised. So we can hope for these material things, but they might not manifest in ways that we're expecting. And so at Brown, like we were saying, Brown is known for being this very liberal school and a Southern school and all these things, but there is real racism at Brown. There is real racism in institutions. They're supposed to be more open-minded. And what do we do with that hope? What do we say to someone who is poor and goes to a place like Harvard or Brown or Yale or Princeton, and is expecting this place to save them from poverty, but in reality, they realize that place has no power to save them. How do we make sense of that reality? So that's what the novel explores. It explores the fact that we can't hope in institutions that aren't meant to save us. We have to hope in higher things and deeper things. Yeah. I probably haven't said too much about it, though. That would really be much.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Can we have a round of applause for our guests? Thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciate it. We have a bottle of whiskey over here for sale, so if you don't have the book yet, please come on over and get yourself a copy.